Welcome back. That did seem like a short break, didn't it? Now it's my pleasure to introduce MinJoo Baek, who was a casualty of the March lockdown in China. She was actually going to physically present to us in Greenwich, but the lockdown made it impossible to leave, and we thought this was going to be the best opportunity to get to hear from MinJoo. So her background: MinJoo studied architecture in New York at City College, hence the perfect English. She is currently assistant professor at Ji An Shetong Liverpool University in Shaogu. I hope I got that right. China. And she is presenting from there now. MinJoo is an architectural designer and multidisciplinary educator. And when I read from her biography, she says she tries to repose architecture and urbanism questions in relation to contemporary conditions of culture, living, pedagogy, and praxis. Today, she's going to explain to us some of the cultural differences between China and America, including the interpretation of what is ephemera. Before I turn it over, however, let me remind you that the Q&A is where you can put your questions for MinJoo afterwards. So without further ado, MinJoo,
yes,
you have the floor.
Sure. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. So is everyone seeing my screen okay?
Yes, it's coming through great.
Oh, sure. Okay. All right. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is MinJoo Baek. I'm an assistant professor at Xi'an Jiaotong Liverpool University Architecture School in China. It is my great honor to introduce this research. I'll be sharing the ephemeral narrative of community market space in Shanghai, China, under the given theme of making space and place from last March conference theme. Okay, so my interest in Chinese traditional market space renovation developed when I first moved to China from Korea in 2015. It is rare to encounter traditional markets in metropolitan cities in Asia nowadays, especially in the city of Seoul, where I'm from. Only a few of them are left. So, sorry, okay. So in Shanghai, traditional markets have been markers of ephemeral space found at the center of local community and central to the local economy. Fast-changing lifestyles and the growth of large online supermarkets affect diminishing numbers of community markets in the daily lives of Shanghai citizens. This research intends to develop a user-friendly environment and market improvement service model for a new type of socially sustainable program. So before I start my presentation, I would like to give us brief definition about what ephemera means to this market innovation project research. So I would say this is a phenomenon and happening and memoir and tendency to share as a narrative regarding Shanghai's community market. And then this research focusing on daily market. There are many traditional markets, but we tend to kind of mix up the idea of what traditional market means. But I am focusing on the food market where the citizens go to buy their groceries every day. So this project aim is to construct a design guideline to innovate the community market. So talking about Shanghai, here's a historical map from 1935. Shanghai, with its international culture developed in years, is the most populous city to live in China. There are none of the cities like Shanghai has multicultural infrastructure. the population reached to 27 million now. The market is a crucial resource to sustain the amount of food for people. So here's one interesting map that you could actually see the triangular shape in the middle, and it is called Triangle Land. And then it is actually representing the beginning of modern vegetable market in Shanghai. So what it is, so this is a depiction, illustration from 1890. It's Qing Dynasty time. And then there were 7 British people actually came to Shanghai to open a amusement park. Yeah, how interesting that is. And then you under the concept of Flying Dragon Island. However, with the maintenance issues and also some other challenges, it didn't really last long. So this triangular shape of the land became a vegetable market later on. So this is the start of a modern type of vegetable market in Shanghai. So this market, the triangular shape land, is the original, the visual of this scenery. So 1-story wooden structure was originally proposed and then built in the beginning, but later on it became so popular, so they couldn't actually accommodate like too many merchants with the stores. So it didn't really last so long. So then much later they will be actually renovating, and then I will show you in a minute. So this is the quality is not that great. However, it's a typical food market scenery in Qing Dynasty time. So Qing Dynasty has 300 time period. So then what you're seeing here is more like the later part of the Qing Dynasty time, which is quite modern, but then this is more like a 1700 time of Qing Dynasty. But food market in China, with the number of population, also the culture of the food, that actually made the importance, how that food market functions in the daily life of Chinese people. And then this is another scenery of the Shanghai vegetable market in early 1900. So you could see it, it's always kind of a busy, bustling life, showing on the photo here. And then another images showing Shanghai vegetable market, more like street markets in early 1900. And then this is particularly showing this French concession period of Shanghai vegetable market. It's also part, kind of mixture of Qing Dynasty time and also later of 1946 time period. And then one of the Shanghai early time, 1920s, vegetable market scenery showing. And then this is actually the same triangular land that was actually built with the 1st-story wooden structure market architecture. However, this one much later, it's like 20 years later, after the expansion, they actually built the market for 3-story building. So then first ground floor would be the vegetable, and then the second floor is the seafood and the meat, and then the 3rd floor would be the sort of like a canteen where people could actually come and they can have their food. So, okay, I have to mention about the size of the scale of this market. It was able to hold 700 market stalls, which is 700 square meter, converted to the square feet, that makes 22,000 square meter. You could actually imagine how big the market used to be. And then here are some sharing of street markets in Shanghai. And then another photo showing how the street shops were like back in the days. And then another sample of public market in Shanghai from early 1900. And here I share this image to show in 1940s market signage was actually written, some part was written in English due to this concession time with the Western influences in Shanghai. So there are like a mixture of like Chinese letters as well as English. So, and then this photo is showing the sceneries of 1970s. I'm gonna like make a big leap in time period. So market scenery, in 1970s, what's important is like late 1970s, which is like 1979, there was a time that China government actually had this cultural reformation and opening their like country to the Western. So then it was very close culture that Chinese only have their own, they only consist with like, stick with their own culture. They wouldn't really accept, Western culture, though Shanghai was very, international already, but still Chinese people, they would actually bond with themselves. But after the cultural reformation, until before the cultural reformation, so most of the daily the food consumable things that they buy was based on the vegetable. That's why the vegetable markets were so big. However, after the cultural reformation, the citizens were able to buy meat, and then they could actually eat meat, chicken or whatever, the pork, but not so much of beef because that's still very expensive. So they were actually making queues to buy meat at the vegetable market. So this is quite a big change in after and before the Reformation, and then after the Reformation. So, and then another market sceneries in 1970s. So you could say the vegetable markets are always busy, and then there are tons of people trying to buy their daily meal prep ingredients. And then here's photo, Shanghai guy trying to buy some groceries to make himself as a model husband, okay. Oops, sorry. And then some scenery from Shanghai market. So now I'm going to share some realistic photos of how the food market in Shanghai, in China in general, okay, so don't be surprised about the kind of brutal images like this. Okay, so butcher shop in Shanghai, where the second brother, they call it as a second brother if you actually translate it. So they start to buy meat, but then they don't really go picky about which part of the meat that they want to buy. They just consume every part of the meat, so which is quite economical for Chinese people because the meat is still very precious at the time. So this is actually showing one of the sort of tendency in the market, and also the food consumerism. Yeah. And then this is from the 80s. All right, so why I'm showing this an 80s food market photo with a lot of banners in the market interior space. Before Reformation and then after Reformation, China government opening the country to the Western culture, they realize how different they are. So then, lots of things in terms of culture, as well as the, the hygiene level, and also the manner of public platform are quite different. So then a lot of Westerner would be really, really freak out when they actually come and see how Chinese people kind of mingle around in the space food market. Wet market is not always kind of tidy that we know. However, it was more rural, and then more kind of brutal. So the government, they actually wanted to educate Chinese citizens to kind of behave more civilized people. So then there are many banners kind of encouraging the civilized manner in the city of Shanghai for the citizens. So and also this one is actually showing one of the former Prime Minister of China visiting the vegetable market, because vegetable market is the very basic foundation of Chinese people's daily life. So then, the governors to kind of bring the citizens together, bond together, and then kind of encourage to kind of make them more active, in economic activities and stuff like that. So they come and encourage, people by meeting them in person. So this is a very iconic moment of Deng Xiaoping coming to meet these market merchants. And then here, Shanghai market scenery again. So 80s is the more like embark of this market phenomenon is changing with market is not just selling the food ingredients, but then market is a platform to meet people, engage with people, and also it's actually worked as an educational space to kind of enlighten citizens. So I will share some of the images so then all of you know and then have some clearer idea of how Shanghai food market is like. Okay, and then Shanghai street market sceneries, with some of the ephemera illustrations. And then I'm going to talk about the issues before. So what is the issue like? Okay, so with the fast and rapid development of China economy, so then the market is actually one of the thing that actually influenced by that fast growing economy, what it is. So the technology and then the economy, they actually work parallelly. So then the technology with the digital, the improvement, so then the local market is not really supported anymore compared to the previous time. So then the online market has been developed, and then the young generations, that elderly generations, they stopped going to the local market to buy their daily food ingredients. They could actually just order from online. So then the elderly people are still actually kind of sustaining the existence of the old food market. However, when there's no young generation supporting the local food market, then who's going, it's not going to last, that we could actually imagine, right? So then that's already kind of influenced big time. So then there are a number of markets diminishing already, and then some of the historical markets are already gone. So the Shanghai government, they actually have sort of a concern regarding vegetable market, which has been this daily daily sort of a thing for Chinese citizens. However, if it's gone, where is this identity, where is this traditional heritage that actually kind of brings people together as a social platform? They don't want to lose it. So then they wanted to kind of start thinking about how to kind of sustain this traditional food market within this community setting. So I'm going to share some of the typical Shanghai community food market types for you to understand. So this is a very common daily community market that you walk on the Shanghai street, and then you will see every now and then. Before, maybe every 5 blocks or 10 blocks. However, now and then maybe 30 blocks, something like that. So the first floor is the market, and then the second floor is the residential. So then they could just come down, and then they buy groceries, and they go up and they cook for their family and they cook for themselves. That's the daily routine that they make every morning. Yeah. And then, of course, there are people come and kind of clean up the the boxes and the rubbishes like that in front of the market entrances. So it's not always pleasant. And then there are researches going on regarding home above market. So there's a university called Tongji that they've been kind of looking at this phenomenon, like how that home above market concept has been carried on, since old time till now. And then their concern is to kind of how to kind of keep this identity of Shanghai lifestyle as a cultural heritage. So that was one book. And then, this is a typical setting, but then it was actually one of the renovated market after all, but showing sort of like, basic image and a basic setting of like how the Shanghai market is like. And then once you go into that, market space is like that. Yeah. So very, very wild. Yeah. And then just like that, you walk in and then you will see like the butcher shops and then vegetable shops, and then the merchants, they're still with the fish, but then they actually gonna have their food. This is their life platform as well. It's not just like in their workplace. So, and then of course, market is not just to sell the food ingredients, but also there are like multiple shops to actually support the merchants. So then this is an interesting flyer that actually is a fabric pattern shop flyer in the community market. Yeah. And then there's a coin trading shop as well in this food market as well. And then alcohol liquor shop. And then here Shanghai market scenery now, as I'm going to share some of the banners, as part of the campaign in the market space, what they are kind of trying to deliver as a campaign message. Here I actually translated some of the banner messages. So here I'm going to read, you and I participate in a more wonderful civilization. So encouraging people to be civilized. Yeah, okay. So civilized traffic makes the city more beautiful. So then, Chinese people are very concerned about making the cities and the country's image, improve all the time, because that's their effort. Yeah, they are very willing to kind of accept the differences and also change and improve themselves. So then the market is not at the school, but it's not at somewhere municipal, the government building, but it's actually happening in the market space. That's quite interesting. And then another one here, it says in the back, it's kind of blurry, but then, I translated here. It says security, order, harmony, and stability. Okay, so people come and then they buy their food ingredients. At the same time, they are educated in the market space. And then some of the farmers market advertisement posters here. And then this is showing Shanghai food market in 2020, 2020 this year. Okay, so in the middle part with the red banner, it says dry and wet should be classified, harmful should be placed separately, resources should be reused, and the life should be healthier. Yeah. And then another one in the back, it says, protect the Yangtze River, do not sell, do not buy, do not eat wild, fresh Yangtze River fish. So they are also kind of, concerned about this environmental protection as well. So the education is not just about hygienic, but also it's the environmental protection at the moment. But China government actually studied this garbage trash classification just about 3.5 years ago. And then the environmental protection, how to practice sustainability in daily life, it's about the same. So then they are aware of what's happening as a global awareness. So that's actually happening in the market as an education. And some of the scenery of the market space. And then this is the ephemera of the garbage trash classification. And also, it's actually saying no sale, no killing of the wildlife, whatever. And then the market campaign poster here, it says no smoking, be honest and civilized in every word and deed. Interesting, right? And then another one. So it's a recent one after the COVID happened. So using serving chopsticks and spoon is a new trend and good habits of a healthy life. And then it's talking about this low carbon life tips. Pay attention to hygiene, keep clean, do not litter. None of these campaign messages were there in the market space before the Reformation. the old time of the food market, but it's only after the Chinese cultural reformation, as well as like when there's like something critical events like COVID and also SARS and stuff like that happening, then they actually kind of like put these things as a public message in the market space. And then another market ephemera showing this store layout in this particular market that I'm going to actually share some of the experimental projects later on. So it was like year and a half ago when I visited, the corner part was torn, but then recently when I visited, they actually folded and then fixed it and they made it really clean. Yeah. And then another ephemera that I found regarding public announcement for protection of COVID from 2021 in the market space, and then some of the written ephemera in the market space, and then some of the sceneries in the traditional food market in Shanghai here. Yeah, bustling, but then most of them are elderly generations here, and then some kid walking around. I thought that was quite interesting to finally see young generation in the market. And then this is the busy time of the day, which means it's like 7:30 in the morning. There is a time that people come out and buy their food ingredients, and then they cook for their breakfast with fresh ingredients. And then this is 9:30 in the morning. So immediately after the busy time of the peak time of the market is finished, the market space becomes a parking lot. It's a phenomenon. Yes, because the market is for morning time, but then the rest of the daytime, it's like dead quiet. So if the space is not going to be utilized anyway, why not making it as a parking space? I thought that was quite smart. So then, how interesting in terms of time, there is the market space itself becomes ephemeral. So then I wanted to share this image with you guys. And then, yeah, with kind of earlier I mentioned about this diminishing numbers of the traditional food markets. So then, the Shanghai governments, they actually kind of wanted to do something, but then what kind of events they wanted to do, they were not so sure. But there's a celebrity called Liu Chun. She's a singer, she's a model, she's an influencer. So then she wanted to kind of deliver the message to the young generations that the critical issue with the Shanghai food market diminishing at the moment, how to kind of sustain the numbers and how to support these food markets for the next generations. She actually opened these art exhibitions under the concept of vegetable market in Shanghai in 2018. And then there's another promotion, but at the same time, it's very consumerism with the Prada. Yeah, so it was Prada Wuzhong market in Shanghai. So Prada actually, bought the market for 1 week, and then they actually, kind of wanted to do this a brand crossover, under the concept of creative, bold, and unexpected. Nobody would expect, Prada would actually open a, food market. But existing food market called Wuzhong market, they were quite slow. However, with this concept, collaboration with Prada, it became super popular. Why? Because they used this Prada wrapper for eggs and then the vegetables, yeah, and then bakery package, and then also the flour package. So then, the young generations, and of course, but I shouldn't say it's only for the young generation, but then all of the generations, they all came because it's fun. And then some people, they cannot afford the real product. They could actually come and get this Prada shopping bag. That was quite sort of an interesting moment of people enjoying Prada, food market. So that was okay, come to the food market, enjoy the products of luxury brand. That was it. So here I'm going to share some of the case studies, like how the renovation of food market has been done successfully in Shanghai and also in Suzhou. Here I'm going to share some of the sceneries from old markets in Suzhou. Suzhou, where I am at the moment, is 25 minutes away from Shanghai, very similar to Shanghai, but a smaller scale of it. Yeah, and Suzhou actually share a lot of similar culture with Shanghai. And then of course, a food market is something basic in Chinese people a daily life. So then here that showing this man with the suit on, yeah, and then selling the chicken that he actually grew, yeah, and then the woman selling water chestnut, and then street market selling eggs and stuff like that. Yeah, but the Shangta market, exactly the same setting of architecture, the ground floor market, and then above ground is the residential space in Suzhou. Shangta market, it used to be just like traditional Shanghai food market, not so much of hygiene, secured, and then there's no order, nothing much. And there was no brand identity at all. It was just a market. But with the collaboration between young designer groups, and then also with the support of Suzhou government, they made a huge renovation of the space. So then there's a proper the signage in the market space, there's a very smooth flow of circulation layout. So then, when the visitors, they come to the market, they have very, very pleasant shopping experience. Yeah, but just to compare what the signage was like, okay, and then what would be very common market signage. There is no such signage, it's only the sign as the number, and then sometimes they use alphabet. But most of the merchants in Shanghai food market, they are illiterate, but it's quite interesting that they use English alphabet, showing this store number. So here at the Shangta market, how the brand identity has done. So it has a more bilingual English, at the same time Chinese, and also the numbers. And then the signage is not just one consistent font, but they have actually their own characteristics to kind of represent the shop's identity as well. And then what you're actually seeing at the moment is 9:30 in the morning. That food market could be that popular. They are not locals. Not only locals, but also the visitors. People come to this market as tourism as well. They are very successful at the moment. And then another market in Shanghai, Mengxi market. So typical setting, ground floor market, and then residential above. Yeah. And then there, the floor plans, and then the right side is the signage saying that no animals in the market, and then no smoking in the market, but using this, quite interesting, material to show. I thought that was quite nice to share. Yeah. And then the signage here as well, using very vernacular materials. Yeah. Vernacular, because the bamboos are very, very popular, and they're very common material that you could actually find in China. So then the construction materials sometimes to make this, they use bamboo sticks, but here they actually use the bamboo stick to make the signage. And then very pleasant food market, unlike the ones that I actually shared before renovation. Yeah. So I'm going to share some of the experimental project, that I call it as a creating ephemera. Okay. So this is the market that we as me and my students from Donghua University, my previous job, there was a studio called Architectural Design Studio, and then I wanted to kind of sort of stimulate my students, because they are the young generations, what that traditional food market means to them, and then how their interpretation regarding sustainable, creating the sustainable market space for citizens in Shanghai as young designers. So this is the market sceneries that we actually made a site visit. My students are making investigation of the existing space, and then they are actually talking to the merchant, and then they're measuring the space, yeah, as a site survey, yeah, and also they are making ephemera notes and stuff and what they have found, yeah, and then yeah, they were quite enjoying, because as young generations, they wouldn't go to that kind of traditional market. And also, like, I spoke to the merchant that they said, like, that was a time that they actually saw this many young people visiting food market, for a long time in their, life experience. And then, some of the ephemera images, that I found in the market here. What's fading, and also, some guys actually kind of helping with the moving. So they are the movers, yeah. And then, yes, this is like a nighttime view. After the market is like completely closed, there are like packs of like packages that trash. However, this has to be like recycled later on. So this is actually ephemera as well. And then my students, yeah, and so this is like some of the research analysis that we actually have made after the field research, and then the survey as well, and then showing some of the existing conditions, and then some of making some of the ephemera images, like what they are actually targeting, what is there and what's happening, yeah, and then some of the mind mapping ephemera images that the students actually came up with, and then some of their marking notes within the existing store, how they want to kind of rearrange and then reconstruct the layout of the space. And then some of the target areas that they want to kind of improve as an image. And then here I'm going to share the final project proposals from the student groups. And then the first group, their concept was Rubrics Cube Market. So what this project aims was, I mentioned that we wanted to provide this design guideline for the market innovation later on, but the main target is to attract young generations, because they are the next generation who will be actually sustaining the market's existence. So the concept from my students were mainly young generation targeted at what they are actually kind of interested in, and also what would be the sort of the concept identity, kind of like the level of young generations. Okay, so the Rubrics Cube market, Rubrics Cube actually has this very flexible linking and also kind of like playful ideas. So they wanted to kind of like make the market space that's not fixed, but then they could be actually very flexible in terms of like shape changing, form changing. So here I'm going to share some of the video. Yeah. So the color identity showing the Rubik's Cube, and also this playful layout of the market space is proposed in this way. Yeah. So definitely it's adding, adding some accent, to this very dull existing environment. And then another group of students, under the concept of sharing space, they actually created this market space, which was very rigid, yeah. But then they wanted to create this very flowy shape of market interior space for people to kind of mingle easier, and also kind of like very playful circulation space. And then another group of students, they came up with this idea of like daytime market and the nighttime market to attract young generation. Young generation, they never sleep, So, and also during the daytime, they are busy with working or like studying, or I don't know, they are night owls. So then what would be the nightlife within the market, targeting young generations. So they, this is a proposal of the market layout space. And then here's a video. Let me make sure that, okay, there's no, just maybe just a bit of sound, okay? So I'll play the video. This is very contemporary approach. So then this food market is not only for Chinese citizens and young generation only, but also they kind of wanted to promote this tourism as well. So then, you know, this is actually the landmark of the area, so that people want to visit and then have fun in the market space, kind of like enjoying the local life. Oops, okay. And then the next one, yeah, so I'm getting to the final, yeah. And then another group of students, you know, they wanted to kind of like, you know, market as educational space is not just to kind of like, you know, selling the food ingredients. So they came up with the idea of like how to kind of like, you know, practice this sustainable ideas with the water recycling, but rainwater recycling, and also in terms of like, you know, growing vegetables as a community urban farming activity. So that's actually one of the ways to kind of bring people together. So not buying the food ingredients only, but then they could actually grow their own groceries within the market space. So that was the concept, showing some of the activities, you know, during the daytime and nighttime, and then it becomes like, you know, a festival place for community people for all generations. And then lastly, the students wanted to convey the idea of a very contemporary approach of like a conveyor belt market interior, but also showing hydroponic vegetable growing system within the market space. So there are site analysis regarding this, you know, this kind of ephemeral images actually created. And then there are sketches, like, you know, how they want to kind of create this like layout within the concept of conveyor belt that's actually kind of carrying the market, the food ingredients. Yeah. And then some of the perspective images, you know, after the renovation within their concept ideas. Yeah. Here. And then lastly, I will play the video, the short video. So you have a better idea of like how the market space. These are the hydroponic, the columns. So then the vegetables are actually growing on the columns. And then some of the like, you know, the seating areas that people actually gonna buy their food, and then you can see the conveyor belt that will be actually delivering the food ingredients as well as like the food that you ordered. So yes, and then within the nature. Okay, so oops, okay, and then these are the posters that students created. So we meant to exhibit these proposals in the market space later on. So then the merchants at the market, they could actually see how our students actually came up with the final idea of the market design renovation. So, yeah. So here's the conclusion, that improving the market environment and infrastructure through innovative design renewal in physical condition and service strategy is very important. Yeah. So then the changes in social environmental sustainable design strategy by maintaining the vernacular aspect of the traditional market functions in the urban environment will help traditional Chinese markets overcome their disgraceful reputations and provide opportunities for Chinese people to enjoy cleaner, safer dining experiences. Moreover, the market renewal could reinforce the attraction of a market to young Chinese consumers to sustain its existence as a social platform. Thank you.
Well, MinJoo, thank you very much. You've taken us on this really fascinating historical trip about traditional food markets in Shanghai. I was sitting here as you were making your comments and looking at the images. I live outside Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is home to a very well-known outdoor market called the Italian market. And many communities, including the one in which I live, have open air markets as well. So it's interesting to see how everything has changed over time, as well as where it's going in the future. I suspect too that there's more than one member of our audience today. When you showed that image of trash pickup with all of those pieces of collapsed boxes and signs, people must have been squirming in their seats because it was a treasure trove, of paper ephemera, which kind of leads me into our first question. And the first question we have here, in the Ephemera Society of America, we assume that people in other countries also love ephemera. And as you've defined your sense of ephemera, you've expanded it to more than just disposable paper products. Have your students become interested in collecting ephemera? In other words, as a result of going out and doing all their on-site research, et cetera, and as you obviously have made them aware of the history of the traditional market, have they begun collecting ephemera?
Yes, before, no, but then after this particular teaching methodology, we actually, targeted. Most of the projects are kind of like imaginary projects that they have their site as. However, this time, when I dragged them to the real marketplace, they kind of realized with the kind of sort of like a, amusement, as well as like a shocking moment, Chinese young generation, they could be very, very contemporary, they wouldn't go to the market and then they wouldn't dare to kind of like, bother to touch anything that's not so hygienic. Okay. But from the time that the students, they were in second year, so then they are still new to design approach, how to make their design methodology. However, now they are very aware of like, what should be done in a way. So then all the projects that they actually try to, because they are dealing with the real sites, so then they actually go and then try to find any sort of ephemera, they could actually kind of like, get the inspiration through. So that is actually a big lesson, from the time. Yes.
So that's good. We have young ephemerists in the making, and that's a very good thing. I'm wondering too, are there places, and this was another question, are there repositories of ephemera? In other words, at universities or in collections, are there places where students could go to engage actual ephemera? Some of those signs that you showed early on were fascinating. They certainly show changes in cultural attitude and national sense of identity. Have any of those been preserved, and can people find them in base research off of those physical objects?
Physical object, which is quite pity that there are several vintage markets in Shanghai. However, they're actually dealing with not so much of like ephemeral images, but then some magazines, and then some of the libraries that they have some like, old photos of the historic images. However, the flyers as well as like sort of like any kind of like, like ephemeral images, like, quite hard to find. So there are like, particular people that who are very interested in collecting those as a historians, that they do have, but then, not so many of them are actually kind of like, archiving that kind of ephemerals at the moment. It's a pity. Yeah. So I would like to actually collect, some of them.
Oh, do you? That was another question we had.
Oh, yeah.
Have you begun collecting?
Yes. So it's quite hard to find. However, every time when I visit, I try to kind of like, search if there's anything valuable. So then I've been actually saving some of them.
Yeah, because taking down signs that are put up as in public places over the course of time, they do represent important historical markers in terms of this is what people were doing at the time. This is, you had that poster with that celebrity trying to lure people, to get the younger crowd involved. Those are important documents.
Right.
The Ephemera Society made a trip to University of Michigan a number of years ago, and one of the important collections at Michigan is a protest collection, and it consists of all of these signs, all of these banners, all of these posters, and it tells us a lot, 40 years removed, about what people were thinking at the time. In the markets themselves, this was another question that was asked. Do the owners of the various markets use any paper advertising, or do they send things through the mail, or do they send out brochures to promote their business or the products that they're selling?
It used to be. However, China at the moment, do you guys use Apple Pay in the US now?
Yes.
Yes, right. But just like that, China, there's a pay called WeChat and Alipay, Alibaba, from Alibaba. Nobody carries, cash. Everything is done with this, QR code scanning. You could immediately get the abundance of an image or the information. So nobody wants to carry anything. That's the problem. Yeah. So then something, hard copy is very, very invaluable thing. So then when I see it, that's why I try to collect. But unluckily at the moment, it works with the QR code.
Yeah, that, you put your finger on, from an ephemerist perspective, you put your finger on a key issue. And that is, I just went to a baseball game with my son this past Saturday. My son lives in Los Angeles. And we did not have a physical ticket. I had a ticket on my cell phone. And it kind of broke my heart to have to use that, because I no longer have a ticket that I can look at, several years from now, assuming I'll still be here, and remember that event. So, this raises, I think, another interesting point, and that is an archival issue, because as you said, nobody wants to carry anything. So the archival challenge is, how do we remember this? How do we track this over the sweep of time? If we're no longer using physical objects, then what do we have as our resource, as our research tools? You might even, there's a course for you to teach.
Yes.
In the future, archiving ephemera, electronic ephemera. So we're running short of time here. I'll close by saying that not only was this an interesting topic and presentation, but it was so well done that one of our guests from Italy thanks you very much.
Oh, thank you so much.
we've had far-reaching effect here and exposure. So MinJoo, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much for the invitation, everybody. Thank you. I'm so glad to share, some of my ideas here with you guys. Thank you.
MinJoo, I want to add my thanks too for joining us this early in the morning and before your cup of tea, which I know is essential. So in closing, I want to thank everybody for being here today. We have a couple of announcements coming up. Don't forget, we've got Greenwich in March. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Or if you're in the Portland area in October, Glenn and Judith Mason have organised for our mid-year meeting of the board, which members are more than welcome to come along and join us on some of the visits we're going on. And of course, don't forget the virtual fair starts in a few minutes. And if you want to join, Mary Beth is standing by to sign anybody up who's not yet a member, so they can get into today's preview and don't have to wait till tomorrow. And lastly, look out for the September Ephemera Society newsletter. We'll have all information and updates of the society in that. So keep your eye out for that in the post. And in the meantime, we're signing off. So again, many thanks and look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
Thank you.